So what I'm working on today is a watercolor of a pumpkin patch that I did recently. Um, Not a very experienced watercolorist. I've kind of played around with them a little bit. My original intent was to get more of a transparent watercolor look to this. What I ended up with was something that looked like it was painted in gouache, which is the translucent uh, type of watercolor. I kind of liked it in the end. I got the color saturation that I wanted. I lost the transparent look, but happy accidents, I guess. Um, you can see here I've already masked off some of the stems already with Winsor & Newton masking fluid. Just going in right now and putting in a flat wash of local color. Just trying to get the first layer in. It's going to dry before I do anything else. Now, by no means can I call this a watercolor tutorial. This is more of a demonstration of how I painted this image. I learned a lot from it, and I feel that the next one I do, the lessons I learned from this, I can apply. One of the lessons was the heavy-handedness of the watercolor that I used, the water to paint ratio. Way too much paint, not enough water in the mix. I also was not that successful in some of my color mixing. I like the look of watercolors where a lot of it's sort of mixes on the paper as the paint is, as the wet washes meld together. I didn't get that with this because I really obviously don't really know what I'm doing. I'm able to get everything dark enough and saturated enough, but I missed that organic, natural looking watercolor that attracts me so much to the medium. Going in here and just darkening some of the shadows, separating the pumpkins from each other. It looks like, no, I still have the masking fluid on there at this point. Again, you can see how much paint is on that brush, how concentrated that paint is. It's just, for a transparent watercolor look, that's not the way to do it. It's something I need to practice with more. Just blending that out a little with mostly water on the brush at this point because I put so much paint down earlier I didn't want to put any more on. Looks like I added a little bit of orange to that. I can't remember if I've mentioned this already, but this is at double speed. Um, it's a very slow process for me because I'm learning it. More experienced watercolorists can throw that paint down pretty quick, especially these initial washes. Just separating some of those sections in the pumpkin into shadow. when this is done, it will be my first complete piece with watercolor. I've played around with it a lot, but I've never finished a complete piece. I've just sort of played around trying to play with the colors. I believe the ones I'm using are Mijello Mission Gold, mostly with some Daniel Smith colors also. Here I'm using that 1-inch soft brush to blend with. This ended up being my favorite brush to use for some reason. I don't know why. Is it cheap? Like a $2? I don't even know what the bristles are. They almost look like straw. They're very fine, very bristly, but they were soft. It was soft enough for me to be able to use. I found that when I used these smaller ones that I got too much of an edge, and then I ended up going back to the big one to blend those out with. Sometimes the cheap art supplies work the best. And again, my intent here was to put the shadows, the darker colors in first, and then glaze over to modify and moderate some of these darker colors. But what it really turned out to was a painting, and I could have used gouache just as easily, or acrylics. Practicing on those too. I haven't used any of that. But I'm in an experimental phase. I'm learning all kinds of new things. I'm normally a color pencil artist. I like the control of colored pencils. Brushes are a little bit new to me. I always feel a little clumsy using them. But practicing a little bit, I'm starting to get a little more comfortable with them. I'm obviously also skipping over the part where the paint is drying. You can probably see in the video that the camera kind of skips through those because, I mean, nobody wants to watch paint dry. So here I've removed the masking fluid from the stems. I left that on while I was doing the local color of the pumpkins. I didn't want to really get a whole lot of orange on the stems while I was doing that. Just going in with that little brush and just putting in the local color on these stems. I'll obviously come back and put in some more of the darker colors and modify that stem quite a bit. I'm going to speed up the video. We'll probably go to 4 times speed just to get through a lot of this little stuff. It's easier, I think, to watch a painting develop in front of you as it's going a little bit faster. I think the whole thing took me probably about 6 or 8 hours of total painting time over, I think, a couple days. So I'll speed this up for you. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about watercolor, you probably know that once it's down in the paper and dried, easily reactivates if you put another layer on top of it. In this case, I had so much pigment down from all the layers I had put down, especially the heavy layers with too much color in them that dried. I kind of muddied up a lot of these darker colors. You know, in this case, not a huge problem. I painted up over them. They're pretty dark anyway, so I think in the end, all my mistakes, kind of the cumulative total of my mistakes, you know, made for what I consider a not bad painting. It's, again, not what I envisioned, but I'll take it. More stem work here. Details. Watercolor also always dries lighter. Once you put it down, when it dries, it dries a shade or two lighter than when it's wet. That's something you got to keep in mind. Right here, you can see I'm lifting. I have a wet brush with just water on it, damp, dry. You know, not dry, but it's not saturated, and I can just sort of scrub some of these areas and then lift some of that color off to lighten it up. Kind of a good way to get some highlights. Again, this not being a tutorial, I really don't have a whole lot to say about it. I'm going to let this play through. I'll speed it up again till the end. I pretty much mentioned all the goofs that I did making it, but goofs are what we learn from, and I learned a lot. I can't wait to try the next one, to apply some of those mistakes and maybe come up with something better or worse. We'll see. So if any of this was useful for you, go ahead and subscribe if you'd like. I'm going to try to put about 2 of these out a month or so. The next few are going to be me playing around, trying new things, making lots of mistakes. But if you find any of this worth it, please subscribe, like, all that stuff. Thank you.